Zhang Henshui's Golden Fen Family Chapter 31, Broken Lotus Roots and Squandering Money in the Outer Room of the Camp. In the late night, people quietly lean on pillows and weep in the empty room. When I woke up the next day, Aunt Li was already sitting in the room, combing Wang Xing's hair. Feng Zhu then said, "Everyone has their hair cut now. I think Wang Xiang can also cut her hair. What do you think?" Aunt Li smiled and said, "She belongs to the uncle now. He can do whatever he wants. Ask me, what are you doing?" Feng Zhu said with a smile, "It's not like she's mine, right?" Aunt Li said, "How can I still take her back after this? And she didn't want to. I'm so old. What else don't I understand?" I said, "Uncle, if you spare a day or two to rent a house, and settle down a day earlier, you will be more comfortable. Living in a hotel like this, like a Buddha without a temple, is not a good rule. What about the little girl and I? You can't let me go even if you rent a mansion. What does it mean if I live in your house? Even if the little girl calls me, it's a bit inconvenient." Feng Zhu said with a smile, "You are so thoughtful. You have already guessed what I want to say. If you had not said it earlier, you would have saved me from worrying about it." He said with a smile to Wang Xiang, "Yes. If you have nothing to do in the afternoon, let's go look at the house. We'll look at the house today, and we can move in tomorrow." Fu turned around and said to Aunt Li, "I'll treat you to dinner tonight as a thank you." Just said a big hat, and planned to get down to the topic slowly. Unexpectedly, before the serious words could be said, Feng Zhu interrupted his words with a stick and exposed the problem. As a result, it is not easy to speak my own words. At this time, Wang Xiang had already combed her hair, washed her hands, took another cigarette, sat on the sofa and smoked slowly. He puffed out a puff of smoke first, then smiled at Feng Zhu and said, "I don't dare to accept your invitation, but I have a few words to discuss with you." Feng Zhu was also lying on the sofa opposite. "Stand on your feet and tremble." But he smiled and said, "What do you have to say? Just say it. It's best to say it openly and without being polite at all." Aunt Li said, "I have always spoken cheerfully, and of course the uncle knows that. Now that things have come to this, I have to say what I want to say, and it is not something that can be settled politely. Now the little girl is the uncle's. In the past, I relied on her to survive, but now, I have no hope. It is not easy to eat this bowl of rice. I am not willing to do it anymore. I plan to leave Beijing and go home in 10.5 months. But in the past few years, things were not going well, and I lost 6,000 to 7,000 yuan. I just said that it was rare for the uncle to support the little girl in the past few months, so he paid back more than 1,000 yuan in debt. The money, let's be less, is probably more than 4,000. After hearing this, Feng Zhu knew that even though the amount she mentioned was like this, the actual amount needed was similar to what Wan Shang said. Stay silent for a moment and let's see what she says. Aunt Li continued and said, "I don't dare to ask for anything else. I can only ask you to take care of my debts, and I will be satisfied." Feng Zhu said, "Listen to what you say. Do you want to? Where's the 4,000 yuan? Aunt Li said, "Oh, how dare I ask for that money? But the little girl is already with the uncle. I hope the uncle can do me a favor for the sake of the little girl." She smiled and said, "Although I am an old man, I am also a poor man. If you ask me to come up with the money, I can't. Just let me make plans." Aunt Li said, "Don't be polite. If you are an uncle, I can't. If you can't get the money, you can't even say the word uncle." Feng Zhu smiled and said, "I'm not being polite. This is not just a few dollars, so how can I just take it out?" Aunt Li said, "Just listen to the uncle. How can I insist that the uncle take it out immediately?" Feng Zhu and Aunt Li quarreled. Wang Xiang held a teacup and sat aside. She just lowered her head and drank sip after sip. Listen to them and don't dare to say anything. The negotiation between the two of them was over, and Wang Xiang couldn't interrupt, so the room was quiet. After a long pause, Aunt Li coughed twice and said with a smile, "Uncle, the play in the Republic Theater is not bad today. Do you want to go to the play?" Feng Zhu said, "I had a lot of noise last night, and I haven't had enough sleep yet. I want to go to the theater tonight. Rest." When he said that, he put on his hat and left immediately. Wang Xiang still sat quietly without saying a word. It wasn't until Feng Zhu left that Aunt Li said, "I'm pretending to be stupid. I'd better say less if you can give me money in such a vague way. If you want to give me a penny less, I can't agree to it." When she said this, she said flatly, His face was sullen, white with blue, and fierce. Seeing this, Yanxi became even more afraid to say anything. Aunt Li asked, "Did he say anything to you?" Yanxi replied softly, "He didn't say anything." Aunt Li said, "He was about to take you away. How could he not say anything? Now that you and him are on the same page, why are you willing to tell me what he said?" Yanxi said, "Didn't you tell me to ignore Kong Liang's words? I always said nothing. When he saw that I didn't say anything, he stopped mentioning it. Bah. You are still planning to use your words to make me angry. He is rich and powerful, and he is not young. Duh, aren't you totally willing to follow him? I see that he is so indifferent. That's what you told him. If you want to be cheap, then you can't do it. Man said that he is the eldest son of the Prime Minister and the eldest son of the President. I am not ambiguous." Yanxi didn't say anything to Fengzhu at first, but Aunt Li now insisted that she and Fengzhu were of the same mind, and she had been unfairly accused, so she couldn't help but squeeze out a fair word. He said, "How is it? Did he spend a little money? How were we before he greeted me? What will we be like after he greeted me?" These two sentences made Fengzhu very angry. Aunt Li was so smoky that she walked over and slapped Yanxi without asking any questions. Yanxi was caught off guard, and half of her face turned red. As soon as she avoided it, Aunt Li slapped her twice and then hit her on the spine. Yanxi received several beatings one after another, and couldn't hold back her tears, so she fell on the sofa and cried loudly. Aunt Li said, "Are you crying? I also want you to know how powerful I am. No matter how easy it is to talk to me, you will almost climb over my head. From today on, I will guard you to see if you can outsmart me." The palm of my hand? Yanxi is full of resentment. How can you tell? Why? After crying for a while, he fell on the bed and fell asleep. I slept from noon until almost dark, and never got up. The small blue silk jacket he was wearing was wrinkled and out of shape. A one-word bun, also fluffy, hanging down to the spine. No matter what Aunt Li said, Yanxi would always ignore it. Later, it was almost time to have dinner, and Aunt Li was afraid that Fengzhu would bump into her and come back. It would be inconvenient for the boss if she saw him like this. He could only say, "Good boy, you have to be considerate of me, and don't forget about me because of the benefits. Although you were not born by me, how have I treated you in the past few years? I can't treat the daughter I raised. Is this okay? I worked hard. For what? I just hope that if you become popular, I will have someone to rely on for the rest of my life. Unexpectedly, you will meet Uncle Jin. I'm so blessed. I've been working hard for a few years, all because of my efforts, and I haven't benefited at all. Do you think I'm wrong? Besides, I've been with you for 5 or 6 years. Now you say something. Go, you are about to leave me. How can I not feel sad?" When he said this, his voice became choked with sobs, and he just threw his nose into the spittoon, and 2 lines of tears began to fall down. He took out his handkerchief and wiped his tears for a while, then said, "Good boy, are you so hard-hearted that you leave me to enjoy happiness? This is your day of success. I didn't dare to stop you, but you have to remember, please do me a little favor, because I have treated you for so many years. It's just this time, isn't it?" Aunt Li said with tears, and everything she said made sense. A woman's heart is easily moved. Yanxi felt sad for a while, but she shed a few tears with her. Aunt Li saw that Yanxi's mind had changed a little, so she stepped forward and yelled, "Good girl, good boy." Then he gently patted her back, and said, "Come on, get up. I was a little impatient this morning and accidentally hit you. Do you still remember it? My good child, don't make things difficult for me. You just have to endure it. I haven't eaten anything for most of the day, so I asked the waiter to bring me a bowl of noodles." As he said this, he took Yanxi's arm and pulled her up. Yanxi was too embarrassed to refuse, so she propped up half of her body and combed her hair behind her ears. When she heard that Aunt Li was going to give her noodles, she shook her head and said softly, "I don't want to eat anything." Aunt Li said, "You kid, are you still angry? You have to eat some." Yanxi said, "How about we make some porridge to eat?" Aunt Li said, "That's fine. Let's wait until Uncle Jin comes back and have dinner together. Your hair is messed up. I'll comb it for you again, okay?" Shang said, "It's already night. Why should I comb my hair?" Aunt Li said, "If you don't comb your hair for a moment, it will be difficult for you. Later, the uncle is back and wants to take you to watch a movie and listen to a play. Don't worry. You have to worry again. Wang Xiang couldn't help but unravel her hair and comb it again. In addition, I found another piece of clothing for her to change into. But that night, at 12 o'clock, Feng Zhu had not come yet. Normally, if Feng Li can't come, he has to take care of him first. There was no explanation today, and I looked angry when I went there. I'm afraid I won't be able to come tonight. Usually at 11 o'clock in the evening, Aunt Li would leave. Since I don't know if Feng Zhu is coming or not today, Wang Xiang is the only one left, so I feel a little worried. For a long time, no one said anything. Aunt Li said, since I moved here, Uncle Jin has never been absent for a night. What's going on today? Are you just so angry that he can't come because he and I want money? Our affairs are in trouble, so we can't just forget it. Little girl, you call his house and ask if he's home. Wang Xiang said, there are several phone numbers at his house. Where should I call? Aunt Li said, just call him. The phone he usually uses is fine. Why don't you call him to his room? Wang Xiang said, I won't call him. He got more and more nervous after calling me, and refused to come. Aunt Li said, that's how it works. If he tightens up a little, we'll loosen up a little. If he loosens up a little, we'll tighten up a little. If we keep having trouble with him, then we'll break up. What else can we say? Wan Shang said, it's better that you fight me. I'm afraid I can't say it right. Aunt Li said, my child, if I were your age, I would be able to make a phone call myself, and I would ask you to say it. Just go ahead and make a phone call. I'm waiting for his reply before I leave. Aunt Li urged again and again, so Wang Xiang had no choice but to take the extension on the table and call. If you answer the phone over there, you have to ask where it is. Wang Xiang was careless and said something about Green Safra Hotel. The other side said, Uncle is not back. Wang Xiang asked, do you know where it is? The other side said, I can't tell. Wang Xiang put down the phone, and Aunt Li said, I'm not talking about you. You are simply, you don't understand anything at all. Why did you tell him it was the Green Safra Hotel? If he would have answered your call, you should have called him. Late. Shang said, what should I say? He doesn't know what I said. Why don't you ask me clearly? Aunt Li said, I won't tell you anymore. With this look, he probably won't tell you tonight either. I'm coming. I won't leave. Let's talk about it tomorrow. From that day on, Feng Zhu always avoided them, neither going to the hotel nor answering their calls. On the fourth day, Aunt Li had no choice but to boldly call Feng Zhiyamen, because he told the waiter who answered the phone that he had a friend named Li who was very ill. The building where Wang Xiang lived had a window facing the street. When she was in the window, she saw Feng Zhu coming in a small convertible car. Feng Zhu walked upstairs and quietly opened the door and entered. There was no sound in the room. After taking a closer look, Aunt Li was sitting aside smoking a cigarette. The gauze curtains on the bed were all put down, and two Wang Xiang shoes were placed in front of the bed, folded together, as if they fell into bed in a hurry, and took off their shoes haphazardly, because the toes of the shoes were still facing inward. Aunt Li suddenly raised her head, looking very surprised, and said with a smile, okay, the uncle is here. This is really a rare visitor. After saying that, she stepped forward to take Feng Zhu's hat, hung up the clothes hanger, and said something to her while facing the bed. He said, I haven't been asleep for a long time. I just asked when the uncle can come. Then he shouted, little girl, the uncle is here. Wang Xiang did not agree. Feng Zhu stepped forward, opened the curtain and looked inside. At first glance, I saw that Wang Xiang had not taken off her clothes. She turned sideways and pulled off half of the thin quilt, covering most of her body. A shiny braid was wrapped around the pillow. Feng Zhu smiled and said, I really know how to sleep. I slept without a single hair tangled. Wang Xiang remained silent, as if she was asleep. Feng Zhu lifted off the quilt, pulled her arm with his hand, and said, wake up. Wang Xiang remained silent. Feng Zhu said, are you awake? If you don't, I'm going to tickle you. As he said that, he reached out and took it out from under his ribs. As soon as Wang Xiang touched her fingertips, she twisted her body and said with her hand, who? Don't make trouble. Feng Zhu said, tell me who else is there. Wang Xiang didn't say anything and pulled off the quilt, and covered his body. Feng Zhu said, okay, if you ignore me, I'd better leave. After saying that, he turned around. Wang Xiang was about to be lifted up when she suddenly sat up, grabbed Feng Zhu's shirt sleeve and said with a smile, let's go. I can't fly. Feng Zhu said with a smile, Then why are you ignoring me? Wang Xiang said. The uncle hasn't come for several days, but he said that others ignored him. Oh, did you pretend to be asleep just now to take revenge on me? Wang Xiang said. They ignored you for a while. You know you are anxious. What should you do if you ignore me for several days? I ask you, why are you so crazy? Feng Zhu said with a smile. I have my own business, so I have to come every day. No, Wang Xiang said. It's not your fault if you can't come. Why didn't you answer the phone? Feng Zhu said. I don't know. Holding him with one hand, he pulled off his shoes with his own hands and stood up. He smiled and said, You are still hypocritical. I can see all your heart and soul. Feng Zhu said with a smile. Just talk. Why are you pulling me? Wang Xiang said with a smile. Why are you pulling you? If I don't hold you, you will run away again. Aunt Li said, with a smile. Don't make trouble. The uncle has just come out of the yamen. Let him rest for a while. Wang Xiang let go and Feng Zhu lay down on the sofa. Wang Xiang followed and sat beside him. Aunt Li excused herself and walked away. At this moment, the two of them started talking endlessly. That night, Aunt Li went early, at 9 o'clock, and said to Feng Zhu, I have something to do tonight, so I have to leave early. Let's meet tomorrow. After Aunt Li left, Wang Xiang complained to Feng Zhu that he was cruel, saying that she had not offended him, so why didn't he come? Later, she mentioned that Aunt Li was angry and she was beaten, and she fell on Feng Zhu and cried. Feng Zhu said, I'm not dissatisfied with you. You know, I just hate her. She asks for too much money. I'll take a few days off to see how she is. Wang Xiang said, What does it matter to her if you don't come for a few days? But I don't know what you are thinking. You still have to endure her anger. Here, you are not making things difficult for her, but for me. Your best way is to give her some money and get rid of her. Feng Zhu said, She wants a few hundred yuan, and I have a deal. She wants a lot of money from me. How can I agree to her? As he said this, he smiled and patted Wang Xiang on the shoulder, and said, Don't be silly. You and I have been together for a long time now. Why do you still help her to ask for money? She won't give you 180 yuan. Instead of letting me spend more money now, why don't you keep the money so that you can spend it in the future? This sentence reminded Wang Xiang. She laughed and said, When did I help her to ask for money? In the future. Your money will be my money. Do I want you to spend more? Feng Zhu laughed and said, Since you don't want me to spend more, you also know that I have been quarreling with her these days. Why were you angry with me when I came? Wang Xiang said, Hey, you are said to be smart, but you are really a fool. You asked me not to do this in front of her, and she will be more suspicious. What else don't you understand about this? When she doesn't suspect me anymore, you can deal with her specifically. I am not related to her. I sold my body and earned money for her, and I was beaten. Would I help her? Think about it this way, and you will understand it naturally. Feng Zhu listened to her words and believed them. The two of them became more intimate, and they discussed the matter of getting married in the future. From then on, Wang Xiang really protected Feng Zhu secretly and didn't try to force Feng Zhu. People who eat in brothels are experienced in human relationships. What can't they see? Aunt Li knew that Wang Xiang coveted Feng Zhu's wealth and splendor, and her mind was set, and it was impossible to change it. She had to take advantage of the situation and slowly reduce Wang Xiang's price until it reached 2,000 yuans. Feng Zhu also knew that there was no way to reduce it any further, so she gave her the full amount. She asked someone to search the alleys of Dongkang for 2 days and found a small Western-style building. Although the house was not big, it was neat and beautiful, with electric lights, telephones, running water, bathrooms, and garages. Feng Zhu also bought a lot of Western-style furniture and moved in completely. In less than 3 days, everything was ready, and Feng Zhu and Wang Xiang moved into the new house together. All the colleagues who were close to Feng Zhu gave him a lot of gifts to celebrate. Feng Zhu also set up 2 tables of wine and had a party all night. While this place was lively, Pai Feng's room at home was unusually lonely. She was pregnant, so she was inevitably sickly. Now that she hadn't seen Feng Zhu come home, she was full of resentment, which made her sicker. It was about 12 o'clock that night. It was cold weather, and it was time to go to bed. Everyone was asleep. Pai Feng couldn't sleep, so she sat up and leaned against the bedrail. After sitting for a while, she wanted to drink tea, so she pressed the doorbell to call Zhang Ma. Unfortunately, the doorbell was broken and there was no electricity, so she had to step out of bed in her shoes and pour tea. She reached out to touch the tea lid on the table, but it was cold. She poured half a cup and took a sip. It felt a little cold, so she had to pour it into the spittoon. She touched the kettle on the wall with her hand, but it was light. Needless to say, there was no hot water in it. Because she wanted to drink a lot, she had to go to the window and call Zhang Ma several times outside, but Zhang Ma didn't hear her. Pai Feng said angrily, "Look, she didn't hear anything at all. Is she dead? Asleep?" Then she fell on the bed and lay on the pillow. She couldn't help but think of Zhao Lian. When Zhao Lian was here, she slept in the back of the room. As long as she was called, she would come. Now without Zhao Lian, she felt that everything was inconvenient. After sitting for a while, she looked through the glass window and saw a half moon hanging on the treetops, shining on the trees in the yard, blurry. A ray of cool wind blew in from the cracks in the window paper, and the room felt cold and lonely. Pai Feng didn't know where she felt resentful, and she couldn't help crying. Although the cry was very low, it could be heard outside. Heesun and his wife in the yard heard Pai Feng calling Zhang Ma twice, first, and thought that Zhang Ma must have come, so they didn't pay attention. Later, they didn't hear the sound of opening and closing the door on this side, which was already strange. At this time, they suddenly heard faint sobbing. Heesun said, "Hey, go and take a look. What's wrong with my sister-in-law?" Huiqing said, "It's gloomy outside. I'm a little scared. Take me out and turn on the light in the corridor for me." Heesun said, "There's a moon outside. What are you afraid of?" Huiqing said, "I can't see the moon, even if it's there. The trees and flower stands block it." Heesun said, "You're not afraid of anything. Men and women are equal. Why don't you dare go out of your room at night in your own home, and need a man to accompany you?" Huiqing said, "What's that? I don't want you to accompany me. I can go alone." After saying that, he walked out of the door in a huff. Heesun saw that his wife had left, so he followed her out. First, he turned off the light in the corridor completely. Huiqing said, "I don't want you to see me off. Please go in. Don't go out and catch a cold." Heesun said, "Look, you were the one who asked me to see you off just now. Now you're the one who complains about me seeing you off again." Huiqing said, "You call me a coward? I won't accept that." As Huiqing spoke, he walked over to Pai Feng's side. Through the window he asked, "Sister-in-law, didn't you sleep?" Pai Feng said, "I slept enough during the day and couldn't sleep at night. Why are you standing in this yard?" Huiqing said, "I heard you call Zhang Ma twice, but I didn't hear Zhang Ma answer. Do you want anything?" Pai Feng said, "I wanted a cup of tea, but I don't want it now." Huiqing said, "I have hot tea. I'll bring it to you." Pai Feng said, "No need. I don't want it." Huiqing said, "Open the door. I'll bring it to you. It's not a big deal. Why don't you drink it?" Their conversation woke up Zhang Ma again. Zhang Ma had gotten up early and opened the door to the main room. Pai Feng's bedroom door was not closed, but ajar, so the main room door opened, and Huiqing and Zhang Ma walked in. Seeing Pai Feng sitting sideways on a rattan chair, her eyes were slightly swollen. So he asked, "Sister-in-law, what's wrong? Are you not feeling well?" Pai Feng said, "Nothing. I just want to have a cup of tea." Huiqing said to Zhang Ma, "You are a very sound sleeper. How can I call you like that? But you don't know anything." Zhang Ma smiled and said, "It's a little cool tonight, and you slept soundly, so I can't wake you up. Does the second young lady have tea? I'll go get it." Zhang Ma left after saying that. They were opening doors here and there. In the next yard, Mrs. Jin was also asleep, so she put on her clothes, woke up Zhaolan, asked her to accompany her, and walked all the way to Pai Feng. Zhaolan walked into the yard and shouted, "Madam is here." Pai Feng hurriedly came out and asked, "Why are you here at this time?" Mrs. Jin looked at Pai Feng's body under the light, and then took Pai Feng's hand and shook it. She smiled and said, "It's nothing. I was over there and heard you opening and closing the door, and people coming and going. I was really scared." As she spoke, she walked into the room and saw Huiqing, and said, "Why are you here too? What happened to you too?" Huiqing said, "I just got up too. I heard that the eldest sister-in-law asked Zhang Ma for tea, but Zhang Ma fell asleep, so I brought it to her." Mrs. Jin then said to Zhang Ma, "The eldest young lady is not feeling well. You should sleep more alert." She turned around and said to Pai Feng, "You two should be careful about anything that happens. I'm worried about your young and confused life." When she said this, even Hui Chang and Pei Fang were silent. Mrs. Jin saw that Hui Chang was only wearing a short flowered jacket with a collar that exposed a large part of his back. She said, "You ran out at night, and you only wore this little bit of clothes. If you get cold, it will be my fault." Hui Chang laughed and said, "I got up in a hurry just now, so I forgot to put on clothes. How can a person of your age not know if he gets cold or hot?" Mrs. Jin said, "I know, but I am careless. I usually don't care about you. If I don't care now, I will not fulfill my responsibility as an elder." Pei Fang said to Hui Chang, "Don't tell her. The more you talk, the more she talks." Mrs. Jin said, "Okay. You think I am too long-winded." Mrs. Jin was talking while peeking at Pei Fang's face. She saw that she was wearing a half-new and half-old green electric velvet short jacket with short sleeves that exposed most of her arms. Her short hair was fluffy and covered her ears. This shiny velvet coat reflected each other under the light, making her face look even sallower. Looking at the bed again, there was a green late crepe autumn quilt, half open, piled at one end. At the other end, there were two soft pillows side by side. From this, she thought that Fengzhu had not been home for a long time, leaving Pai Feng alone in the room to sleep, which was very wrong. It was not a big deal under normal circumstances, but when Pai Feng was so worried and sick, it made her even more worried. So she said, "Fengzhu is getting more and more out of control. I will call him in front of his father tomorrow and reprimand him. I will ask your eighth sister to sleep with you tonight." Pai Feng smiled and said, "Eighth sister rolls all over the bed when she sleeps. I dare not listen to her, but I am not afraid. Don't bother her." Mrs. Jin said, "Oh, I am confused too. Why ask her to come? She will kick around." When Mrs. Jin said this, Huiqing smiled at Pai Feng. Pai Feng said, "Oh, you heard it wrong, old man. That's not what I meant. Otherwise, let's ask eighth sister to come and sleep with you. I can't take the responsibility of inviting her here." Aunt Zhang laughed and said, "Madam, you never tell jokes, but you are happy when you mention having a grandson." Pai Feng said, "I told you not to wake up at first, but now you are in high spirits." Mrs. Jin said to Aunt Zhang, "It's true. Don't sleep so soundly in the future. You have to be extra careful when the master is not at home these days." She said to Huiqing, "You should go to bed too. If you sit here, you have to put on more clothes." Huiqing just smiled foolishly after hearing this. Mrs. Jin gave a few more instructions and then went out. She walked to the corridor and came back to Huiqing and said, "Go and put on more clothes." "Why are you still here?" Huiqing smiled and said, "I'll go right away." Mrs. Jin waited for her to go back to her room before she left. Pai Feng's affairs in her room had come to an end, but Huiqing's affairs had started to get complicated again. Alright, this part of the story ends here.
Want to know what happened next? Let's listen to the breakdown next time.